Welcome to the summer of Woo, you radiant brightlings. This season, the show that wildly recognizes, encourages, and invests in the radiance we all carry is casting a light on all things mystical. By tapping into the magic in and all around us, we'll better connect to our individual and collective sacredness so we can shine our brightest. Join us in this 6 episode mini season as we open ourselves up to mystery and woo.
Tracy, this is actually our episode 5 of our 6 episode mini season.
Yeah.
What are you thinking so far?
Well, I was actually thinking lately about the Barbie movie, and I'll get there. You know me, I'm a storyteller.
I do know.
So I saw it on opening day, and it brought back like all sorts of memories. But my favorite part of it, leading up to it and then after it, was all over social media and especially TikTok. People like were showing their Barbies from when they were kids. So they were like rating the holiday Barbies and their favorite. Some girl's mom like dedicated their entire basement to Barbie and like made vignettes and like has the most amazing collection and um there's a local woman to us in Minneapolis who actually designed Barbie clothes for like
Yes.
40 years, and like she has a coffee table book, but one of the local magazines or news sites like dedicated some time to her, and she designed some of my favorite Barbies. And so it was so much fun to relive that. But after the Barbie movie, I started seeing people sharing how they played with Barbies as kids. And it started with, hey, did everyone else only have one Ken? Like even if you had three sisters, like we all only had one Ken, right? We were making do and we were okay with it. But then that led to like people like acting out how they played with their dolls as kids. And I realized like across races, across countries, I mean, it's definitely more popular in America, I feel like, because Mattel is here, but we all played with dolls the same way. We all did the same stories. We all did a lot of the same things. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we did different. My Barbies went bungee jumping. I haven't seen anybody show that. But as I was preparing for this show, and like as I saw these people and had these thoughts about like, oh wow, we all played Barbies the same way as kids, which like cognitively and developmentally makes sense. But I was like, I think we had the same things with magic as kids, that especially little girls, that I hear all these little girls that like would make potions with like stuff they found outside, or like would make these magical like acorn bowls and like would do spells. And I've talked like I used to think I had a stick that controlled the wind, and there's so many people that resonate with that. And so like when we were little beings, we had all the same kind of I'm magic, I'm connection, I'm powerful beliefs, thoughts, feelings, and actions and stuff. I thought the show would just be like, I don't feel like we've been wooey enough this summer for how much intro and conclusion. And so I thought maybe we could just like, I don't hear a lot of people talk about their woo. I see it on social media. I see more witchcraft books in the store, in the library, which is great. But there are very few people in my life, even the ones that listen to this podcast, who know about how wooey my beliefs get and how much I've done. Or some people, when they hear about the podcast or I talk to them about stuff, they're like, oh, I never would have thought. And I get so offended, but I'm also really protective and I hide it. So so I
I
wanted
love
to,
it that you're once offended and also
yeah.
protective of it.
Like,
Yeah.
first of all, how dare you? Of course, I'm a magical, energetic, powerful healer being, but then also like, oh, I'm not going to talk about this stuff. I want them to take me seriously in life. Right? And then,
That's interesting. I never think like that, but go ahead. Yeah.
well, and
Yeah.
so that's the thing is I think that's how we connected, was like I walked into your office and I was like, oh, I'm safe to talk about this here. Right. And so we just were like open with it. Whereas I don't
Yeah.
think anybody walked into my office and would have thought the same thing, or my little cubicle corner.
Oh, you had some hints. You
That's
you left
a hint. Like
some.
once
Yeah.
you knew, right?
Right, right. When exactly. But no one else, I don't think I talk about the at work every once in a while, because I've had people ask me for tarot readings at work, just who
So, and
know.
that's just it. Like work. and I'm protective of myself, right? And how I'm perceived because I'm aware of it. And with family, I'm more protective of not myself, but respectful of what I know their beliefs. There's a lot of, a lot of my spirituality would clash with their religious beliefs and what they think of these things, right? And it's not my place to replace that for them or educate if they're not asking for it. So I'm just not going to bring it up. Um, but then like on Bumble, I'm like actively being like, I only want to talk to you in this BFF thing if we can talk about tarot cards and astrology. Like I'm sure we all have other interests, but I want a witchy friend. And so
I thought
yeah,
it
so
was, yeah.
there's a
I
split.
sorry, go ahead.
I just said there's just like a split in my life. And so I thought it'd be fun today on the show to just talk about some of our wooiest experiences and beliefs and practices, or even what we want to explore, and just like be really out in the open with it. And then hopefully maybe people will share with us or at least be inspired to share with other people or maybe get introduced to things they've been curious about and like get back in touch with that little kid who thought they controlled the wind or whatever.
No, seriously, I love that. I always think well, I think a lot of things, but I actually can talk about pretty woo stuff with my children and my granddaughter.
Oh, they
And
gave you the best birthday gifts and
they
Christmas gift. Yeah,
oh
right.
really? Yeah, it's super cool. Like I've got wands and potions and tarot cards and all kinds of things. Um, but and there are other family members as well. My one sister is extremely woo. We don't always talk about it, but she can straight up read your palm. And she uses your palm as the gateway to read your life, right? It's extremely woo. But the funny thing is, we get together and it's not necessarily that we're going to talk about that. I have a very close friend who is an energetic healer. She is well known. She's published, I think, like 37 books or something ridiculous like that. A wonderfully ridiculous on mediumship, on being psychic, on, energy healing, on the chakras, on all kinds of different aspects of woo, right? And more times than not, when we get together, we end up talking about politics or, our kids or this. So we end up talking about actual very 3D things because I think because we both know we're extremely comfortable talking about the woo, but sometimes you do need to be rooted in that. But also, she is who I've had one of the most woo things happen. I've been
Yeah.
involved in one of the most woo things with her as
And
sort of the facilitator. Yeah.
it's so I feel like I'm a woo pusher for as much as I just talked about I hide it. There are people in my life where I feel like I'm the gateway woo. And like you said, like we don't really talk about stuff. It doesn't super come up super directly, but then like you said, maybe they'll ask for a tarot card reading or they'll be like, "Oh, what about my astrology again?" And I'll be like, "Oh, I have your full chart already saved in my notes app. Let me double check what you are," right? Or
Right.
they'll be like, "Oh, I gotta remember to check my birth time so I can look at my chart." And I'll be like, "Oh, you gave it to me once. Here it is." Like I have it memorized. But like my sister, one of my sisters, she doesn't like practice it that I know openly. She's supportive of it. She gifts me stuff in it. But like she's had a stream of bad luck lately. So when I had one of her kids over at my house for a sleepover, and when I brought her daughter home, I gave her a brand new like glass blue spray bottle that I got her from Amazon and a thing of Florida water. And I was like, "Hi, I know you don't know anything about this, and I don't care if you believe in it or not. But every day, this is what you're going to do with this." And like maybe trees will stop falling on your house, like at the very least. And here's some pins with the Nassar evil eye blocker. Please put these in all your vehicles. Like, pretty please. And then she's like, "Oh, my daughter actually loves these. And she has like 9 bracelets on her arm with them." And I was like, "Good. You should wear some." And so I wondered, like, I have had wooey experiences with my woo friends, or a lot of I feel like a lot of my energetic healers and practicers are more like friends, and like that shared bond like you're talking about is so much better than when it happens alone. Right, because you're like, I'm not crazy in this, right? Like there's just like, this is palpable and this feels true. um but then it's like a way to talk openly about what just happened as well, right? Like you said, like usually you talk politics, but then you had this amazing experience together and you got to share it. And if I'm remembering the story correctly, like you learned a lot from her, right? And
Oh yeah, we were, well, I'll just say, I can't remember if I shared it on the show
I don't think you
before or
did. I think
not.
it had like just happened. You're still processing.
Okay. So we had traveled together, and she had actually experienced, now like I said, she has been doing this work for years, and it is her work. It's not like she has a day job and she does this. This is her work. She has clients. She writes
I'm
books.
so
She
jealous.
gives, you know, workshops and all kinds of stuff. Like it's just super cool, the things that she does. And she had decided to have a guided experience with, now it wasn't ayahuasca, but it's sort of like that type of thing. And
Cacao?
that might have been part of it, but I think mushrooms might have been a part of it
Okay.
too. And so I just don't want to, I just can't remember the entire thing. Well, she basically, what she said is like, she's like, I'm already there. And so I don't think I'm going to need that much more to get past that point, you know? And so they did this thing. And basically, these beings started talking to her and through her. And it was more than one, but it was sort of more like a collective, right? And she would access them, and they would give her, yeah, channeled, she would channel these messages, right? And because it was cacao, because after that, anytime she wanted to connect to them, all she had to do was eat dark chocolate. She didn't even have to get like the
Because
cacao.
it's like a
All
sense
she had to
memory
do,
that like helped her access.
exactly.
Oh, that's so cool.
So every night, like 3 nights in a row, we'd both eat the dark chocolate. And then she'd just start talking with these people, and I could ask questions, and we would get messages and information, and I'd be writing things down because she was getting information about herself as well, but she couldn't always remember what they had said. And the information and just the things that were said, it was it was just mind blowing. And so I don't have the words to describe how it felt to be. We were literally in a lanai, gorgeous outside temperature, eating dark chocolate and having these beings from a different dimension speaking through her. And there was, I'm sure at one point I was like, this is my life. I'm actually experiencing this right now, right? But and I could feel things because they would move through. They'd be like, okay, we're going to hold your hand now, and I could feel it. I don't care. I don't care if it was suggested. I don't care. I could feel it. And then they like went through and got rid of some like calcium buildup in my brain, and they moved through my body, and I could feel this warmth just travel through. It was amazing. So that was that's just one of the experiences. So then I always think it's funny when we get together, this same friend, we go walking and there we are talking about politics or, you know, dating or something.
I love that you brought up like the suggested or the psychosomatic. Because when I'm in that protective defensive mode, but still trying to kind of like share to either open up the other person or kind of test the waters, I am very, or just be like, I'm gonna talk about me anyways, but I also want you to know, like, I'm not an idiot. I do think about it practically too. And so for me, even if it is psychosomatic, cool, still working, whatever gets you there, right? Like if eating dark chocolate helps her tap into her inner knowing, eat all the dark chocolate you want. It's not gonna hurt you. But like for that suggested thing, like one of my favorite like genres of TV and movies is like that white collar grifter leverage, you know, the ways, all the ways in which they do get people to kind of like trust them, believe them, do what they want them to. And so, I mean, I'm not an expert in it or anything like that, but I have been to enough readers and I've been open to enough experiences that I have definitely had the ones where I'm like, well, this is just going to be a fun story. This is the funniest freaking reading I've ever gotten. Like there was one that I did at the Renaissance Fair with my sister, and I was cold, so she gave me her sweatshirt because she was warm. She played on a high school soccer team, and so whatever the shirt was soccer team related. This woman, like I could tell by how she held my hands, she was just tracking my blood pressure, and like my heart rate and stuff. And one of my favorite things to do at that time, my mom was going through some health things and had high blood pressure. And so she had to regularly take her blood pressure, and she was just on, whether she was on drugs or, you know, being mindful or breathing, like it was just always high. And so my stepdad and I, whenever we were at like, if we went shopping or out together and there's one of those blood pressure cuffs, we'd have challenges to see if we could like get as low as we could, beat the other person, if we could get to a certain number. And it annoyed the heck out of her. Right? Like, so I knew like I can get myself really calm and I can kind of stay there regardless of what she's saying, right? And so she was asking, I could tell she was asking me all these leading questions while also like paying attention to things that like the grifters would, you know. Is she smiling? Is she getting excited? Is she looking confused? Right. So I just kept the blankest of faces in my mind, right? And just stayed really calm the whole time. And I have a cassette tape of this somewhere. Like my sister and I would listen to it and just roll on the floor and laugh. She told me all about this soccer boy who I was going to meet at a summer camp and who's just going to steal my heart. And like I was the furthest thing away from athlete. And I was like, hey, if this ends up being true and I meet a soccer player or like just some man and he happens to play soccer, coolest thing ever. But this woman was telling a tale and I was eating it up and I was like, that's the best $30 I spent. Like we laughed about that for weeks. But then I have also met people and individuals and readers who, I mean, one of my favorite healers and teachers and just mentors to watch in this space, I talk about her all the time. My first introduction to her, we didn't talk. She didn't know me at all. She knew I was a friend of one of the other people in her cohort that were learning, and it was in a drum circle. And while they were doing drums, they were just walking around healing people. I was really bummed because each of the people that were practicing and putting hands on people and healing had gotten to me but her. And I had felt really drawn to her, and the drum circle ended, and I was just so disappointed. Like, oh, I'm not going to get a chance for this. So as people are kind of just like chit-chatting, packing up, getting ready to leave, she comes up to me and she's like, hey, I didn't get to you. And I'm feeling like you were kind of disappointed. And I was like, yeah, it's all over my face. I get that. But so she's like, do you mind? And I was like, go for it. This one, like I talked to her for a total of 90 seconds, right? And she just puts her hand in front of me, kind of over my chest, but not touching. And I felt like my soul came out of my body, right? Like not just like excitement over being chosen or getting what I wanted, right? But just like zoop, like she just took me out and like kind of looked at me, put me back in, and then she told me, she's like, "Oh, is there like a little girl in your life about 5?" And just in my head, I was I'm super close with my niece and I used to nanny for her and she was really on my mind lately. Not someone I talked to my friend about, not someone I had pictures in my office about or anything, right? She just looks at me and she goes, that's where all the love comes from. And like Nova is pure love, like pure love. And then in just like the 3 minutes I had with her, she went on to just like describe everything going on in my life and like me as a human being and a person and just like heal a whole bunch of stuff that I'd never talked to anybody about before. And that's when I was like, oh, you are the real deal. And I'm still in touch with 2 of the 4 healers that were there. And the other one I see pretty regularly. She also gives massages. And like the things that we go through, like in that moment, or just like I said, like how I feel, like they just kind of like zoop. And I just get to like energetically expand and be safe and like feel healed and feel known and seen and like get all this knowing without like having words to describe what the knowing is or anything practical. Like you said, it's such an undescribable but like palpable experience and feeling.
Yes, it's almost as if when you put words to it, you lessen it, you make it smaller than what it really was. The words just can't, they just can't be, it just can't be contained within the words.
it feels like it cheapens it, right? Or like I'm so like I feel part of why I've been able to be so open with you about these experiences is I know there's like no judgment, right? I feel like
Yeah.
that's why I like to cherish them and hold them sacred, and I don't want it taken from me if I cheapen it by trying to talk about it. I don't ever want it to seem like I'm bragging. Like usually I'm trying to tell people like, my God, you have to see this person, right? Like I didn't like there were so many people in my life that it was like, oh, you have to see her, but like they would never, right? They wouldn't pay for it, they wouldn't drive for it. So one of my sisters I could tell just needed it, and I knew she was kind of into this stuff. So I was like, look, if you drive to my house, I will take my nephew, your son, to the park. And then my healer's going to come to my house and she's going to practice on you in my house. And this is my birthday gift to you. And you don't, if you don't want this, you don't get a different gift. Like, this is how bad I want you to have it. Like, I'm
Woo
if someone comes
bullying.
here to see me, like, your house is too far for her. Her house is too far for you. I am going to like be the conduit, right? And I was so worried that she wouldn't feel the same, or like what if I oversold it or put too much on it or whatever. And like my nephew and I got back early and we just waited in my backyard till they came out, and I saw my sister open the curtains in my kitchen window to like indicate that they were ready and done, and I was like, oh, it worked. Just like they had the most special time together, and I was like, I want everyone to experience this, and it saddens me more people aren't open to talk about it. um I thought in my family, I know you've talked about your mom and the community you got to grow up in, and I'm so jealous, and like that's what we're going to build when I win the lottery on Saturday. um but I thought I was so alone in my family with all this stuff, and I never really talked about it to them. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I was trying to get more stories out of my grandma and record things on voice memos because she had just had a stroke and we had to put her in a home. Um, and I don't know how we started talking about it, but this woman shared with me all these stories. Like this time she went to this church in California. What's it's like a Spanish style church. Do you know the word for it? It just escaped me. Um, do you know
It's
kind of
not
what I'm
coming to
thinking
me.
about though?
Yes.
Really kind of like during Manifest Destiny when Mexico still owned California, like one of those churches that has been there forever. And her and her sister were just like doing a tour around California, and my grandma walked into this church and saw spirits all over, and just like had this experience and like recognized they weren't bad, malevolent, like they didn't mean or harm or anything, but how overwhelming it was in this experience. And then when I was like recognizing and realizing what she had happened to her, and I was like, has this happened before? And she told me all these stories of what she experienced as a kid, and that even her brother experienced. And then like some of these other things as an adult. And then I think she kind of realized what she was sharing and that I was recording. She got really shy about it and didn't want to talk about it anymore. And I was like, what would I have done without the internet? Like, I would not, like, when I had experiences, I went online. Right? And like,
Well, so that's so interesting though, because I didn't grow up with the internet. And so when I first had experiences or things happened or when I was living at Harmony Hills and we did certain, we called them sit-ins. It was called a sit-in. Um, Not a seance, a sit-in. And Jim, sort of it wasn't a cult, okay? But
a
Jim was
community.
like, yeah, Jim was like the de facto leader type
Yeah.
person. He did a lot of the workshops and things like that. And he was the person who would sort of go into a trance and then people would speak through him, teachers would speak through him. But there was nothing I could look up. How do you look that up? Like, oh, I don't know. You just couldn't
So,
look it up.
but your mom seemed open to it. Did you talk to your mom about this stuff
Oh
then? If
yeah,
things
my
happen? Yeah.
mom. Oh yeah. Yes, I did talk to my mom. And I on it full disclosure, I only went to one sit-in. I was 11 when we moved into that house. And so it was a little bit of time before they thought, well, okay, she can be in a sit-in. And my mom prepared me for it. She was like, okay, we're gonna be in the let's go in the bathroom and turn off the lights because it's gonna be really, really, really dark. And she goes, so I want you to know what it's gonna be like. Turned off the lights. And I swear to you, Tracy, that woman waited like 5 minutes before she spoke in the voice that was reminiscent to how Jim would speak to us. Complete darkness. And then I'm 11, 12, maybe 12 at the time. Like, it's freaking dark in here. And then all of a sudden, this voice comes out of the
Your
darkness.
mother starts speaking like someone else, right? Like that's got to be
Yes.
trippy in and of
So,
itself.
and this is what it sounded like. Students.
Was
I
he a
went,
channeler when he would go into
yes,
trance? Okay.
yes. So he channeled. So the first voice that came through him was the students, blah 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 blah, and just like many other things that I couldn't track on, and the heavens and the universe and the stars and blah blah blah. And then a different teacher came in, and this one was very fun and a light voice and this, and you're in the garden, and but it was like it was almost as if I heard the words, and then when the sit-in was over, I no longer had the words that they said. I only had the feeling.
Yeah, I
uh,
always hate it. There's a couple practitioners that I've been to, and I don't like the ones that don't let you record. And I kind of understand it and I kind of don't because of that same thing, because sometimes you're getting so much information and there's like the experience you're having, and then it's the reaction to the experience you're having, right? And then it's the reflection, right? Like you have so much going on, and it's such a all the senses, even outside of the five senses we know about experience, that it's like technology would be great to capture this. And I'm so
yeah.
appreciative of the ones who do let you record things or take notes and things like that during it. Um, I've been to that drum circle I went to. It was another friend that we worked with. And again, I could just signs in her office. She was no shy about it. And I don't remember how we kind of got to it, but she's the one who introduced me to a Kundalini yoga class. Or more of we did a gong bath, which was just transformational for that time. And then that led to me doing, Kundalini yoga and stuff with her. But she's like, "Oh, I'm going to a drum circle. Do you want to come? It's like $15. This is it." I was like, "Sure." And like we rode together and all that. We show up and I sit down. She's like, "I'll be right back." And she like went and was like with the people leading it and with the healers and stuff like that. And I was like, "Oh, maybe this is how she heard about it. Maybe she does this a lot. Maybe she's a friend. Maybe she's paying for me because she does that kind of stuff, right?" And then we start and she comes up to me, she's, "Oh yeah, I'm a healer." She was the one, she was assigned to me first. And I was just like, "Oh yeah, of course you're a healer. That makes so much sense, right?" And so we went through all that together, and she was such a huge introduction to that. But she brought me to my very first channeler. And the way
Oh,
I laughed at what this woman told me was in my career future. And like, granted, it's been, about 5 years since, but it seems to be the future I'm heading towards or things I'm good at. I'm just like, no, I don't want that. But like my friend didn't prepare me. Like the channeler, her voice changed, right? Like she became the
yes.
separate person. And from the outside looking in, I could see how you could be like, "Oh, that person's faking it and they're just putting on this character." But when you're in it, I don't know. Like,
Right.
and
Right.
so I'm really careful with those things to recognize that I'm not going there in a place of need, right? Like I stopped listening to the tarot readers on YouTube when I started looking for the things I wanted to hear and getting excited about that, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, nope, you can't only resonate with what you want to hear. You can't get overly excited about the things that you want to hear anyways, right? You're just going to hear that stuff, right? Or like some of these channeling events I've been to, you can tell these people just have so much need in them and like need this person to give them all the answers. And I view this stuff as more like an add-on and informative to my life, but
You know, Tracy, it's interesting that you bring that up, that you stopped listening to them when you were showing up with need. And I agree with you. When I was just doing my little 3 card tarot pulls on for Facebook Live, I actually stopped because, and I had done it for a year, but I stopped because more and more people who I didn't know were coming on and then just being like, is he going to ask me to marry him? Does she love me? Is this person? And it was just all this need, and it was need around love. And it just became overwhelming to me. Like, no, this is, that's, first of all, that's not what this is. But second of all, it felt too needy to me. And then I just stopped, and I sort of feel bad about that because there were some people who, I don't know, it was
But I
enjoyable to do.
appreciate that you stopped because one, it was triggering and you're having a reaction, right? And you don't want to show up like that.
No.
But I I somewhat appreciate when those things come up because it lets me know the character of the energy worker I'm dealing with. And that if they really feed this person and it becomes a like relationship of like, oh yes, I'm gonna tell you all this. Oh no, but I lost the connection. Come back next week, kind of a thing. That's a charlatan. Even if they have the gift, you're using it wrong. That's not okay, right? So a lot of stuff was, the love thing comes up a lot. Sometimes health, and not even their health, but like, my husband of 40 years is dying of cancer. Like, and it's just like, oh, you want to hold space for them. And so I appreciate the ones that hold space for them and give them healing and love and light and support. But then there have also been ones that are like, give them medical advice and nutrition advice, and
Yeah,
it's
that.
so misleading and scares me that that's where it can be. And
Mhm.
so I also, like, with these conversations, want to help people understand like what this stuff can be used for. And so that'll be our next episode, kind of harnessing your power and like how to be a filter, not a sponge, right? And like how to
Yeah.
recognize what your reactions are and what you're connecting with, because it can be a lot.
Yeah, and I think too is like asking yourself, why am I doing this? What outcome am I seeking, or what validation am I seeking outside of myself? And sometimes we really do need that outside, not necessarily validation, but just like, am I on the right path? I just don't know what I'm doing. Um,
I mean, sometimes like it is nice to get like the validation is comforting, right? Like a lot of these times when we ask super specific questions, we need the comfort of feeling seen and being known, and of feeling like we know the future, right? Or we know what this pain is gonna be for. And so I think participating in these things, like most things, kind of takes a little bit of emotional intelligence around your own self and being able to recognize when you're
good
seeking,
point.
seeking, seeking versus connecting. Um, but it's also hard because some of my like earliest experiences of this, I was like 5 years old, right? And like, so what do you do with these things that you kind of recognize as a kid, maybe shut down for a bit in early adulthood, then reconnect with, but don't think you can talk about with people, right? And then all of a sudden somebody on the internet is telling you the future, right? Like what? And you're like, oh, I've been this powerful since I was 5. This is a sign. Like it's a really weird cycle to be in, and it takes self-awareness, I feel like, to get the best out of it, right? And not, I feel like we talk about resistance a lot, and I feel like that's a form of resistance to your own growth, right? That sometimes we're getting these energies or these signs or symbols or like directional pushes, and instead we end up in a spiral of past actions and behaviors, right? Because we're not
Mhm.
um filtering it well enough. Um, but yeah, I there were so many like wooey things I've done that I made a list of before the show. And like even just talking, I was like, I've thought of 10 more. Like I can't believe we only have like 5 minutes left of the show. And I was like, I haven't even touched these things, and I have like 1,000 more stories
Yeah,
to
you know
tell.
what? And every while we're talking, I do too. I'm like, oh yeah, and that one time I saw that that psychic, and she just nailed it, but I didn't know. I was like, that can't be true. And then like 5 years later, everything she said came true, and I was like, oh, holy crap, you
Well, so
know.
when I first learned about like guides and stuff like that, and one of my friends was like trying to tell me like which deities she saw around me, and she was trying to tell me stuff about guides, and I was like, oh, this isn't my brand of crazy. Like I have a lot of crazy, but this one ain't it, right? And so like I hope I wasn't too disrespectful of her, but I did have like my boundaries and protections up from like years of ignoring it. But then it dawned on me, like my mom was telling me this story that when I was 5 and in preschool, I used to come home with all these elaborate tales. And like some of the stuff she brought up, I kind of remembered, and like they pegged it as imaginary friends. And I'm now like, I can still picture those three people as she described them, three people who didn't exist, my imaginary friends. And like, I immediately pictured them as I probably did when I was 5. And I was like, oh, I think those were guides. Like, because they weren't people to me. And they weren't like, as an adult hearing these stories and like having like this sense connection memory thing. And I'm like, that's what opened me up to guide work, was recognizing like, oh, you've been doing this and talking about this since preschool, at least since preschool, right? And like one of my earliest memories, like I don't see things. It's never been my gift, or it's something I just don't want to, right? I don't really like see stuff out and about in my neighborhood, my house, things like that. But I think when I kind of shut down some of my access to whatever you want to call these gifts or senses or whatever, I remember when I was 5, I was going to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and the wood grain in front of me on the door not only looked like a witch, but came out like a 3D magic eye picture, and was like a face, a witch. And like a lot of people are like, oh yeah, we tend to see faces and things. It's a human biological response. And I'm like, no, no. And so as a kid, I think I saw of it as something negative and bad and scary. But as an adult, I'm like, I wonder if that was just them being like, oh, you're ready for a little bit more. And then I was like, nope, too much, too much, too much. Because when I hear about some of these other like healers and energy workers, that's what they're seeing and doing, is kind of like these things I saw as a kid and was like, no. Oh my God. I feel like we could go on forever. So my final question. So we have so much more to talk about. Maybe we'll do more than 6 episodes. I know this topic will come up in other stuff, but so when we were planning for these episodes, we kind of broke down like all the types of woo that we're interested in, have heard about, into all these different categories and all this different stuff that we might talk about. And it's in there, it's in the outline if you're not looking at it, if you scroll down. But like if you had to summarize your woo, if you had a word, a category, like you're coming up with a D&D character, right? Like
Yeah.
what would you categorize as your woo? And it doesn't have to be something that exists. You could make something up.
Well, I'm trying to think how to explain it. And I am looking at the list, and I love it that you called one thing Sky Daddy.
I didn't come up with that, but I love it. So Sky Daddy, it could be God, source, spirit. It could be astrology, cosmic stars,
Yeah.
divination. Like
Yeah.
there's like a
I think that
category Sky
I
Daddy.
think my divination, my woo is divination. Like
Okay, I would
that's
agree
what
with
I would categorize it as. But I also am very drawn to any kind of earth magic and elemental. And so I don't know, I'm pretty eclectic, I would say.
that. And
I'm
yeah,
eclectically woo.
eclectic witchcraft is a thing, right? Like a lot of witchcraft,
Hmm.
not Wiccan, but witchcraft like
Yeah.
encompasses everything.
Yeah.
No, I think it's funny. One of the books that I have says a guide for modern witches. And I was like, isn't anybody in their time period that does witchcraft a modern witch?
I love it.
Right?
Yes.
Like I just wonder in like 300 years, whatever this is that we're doing, what will modern witches of 300 years from now call our kind of witchcraft, right? Like, because I'm sure everybody thinks about like medieval toil, boil and
Yeah.
trouble, right?
They'll call it TikTok witchcraft.
TikTok witchcraft. I think I would be eclectic too. I have like an inner knowing. A lot of the people that I've worked with all describe the same type of healer to me.
Yeah.
Okay, we're starting to run out of time, so thank you for listening. Please connect with us the Brightly Podcast on Instagram and YouTube, or email at brightlypodcast@gmail.com, and keep coming back. We have more
Yeah.
woo.
Yeah. We hope you have a bright and magical day. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.